He walked into the cafe he secretly owned, just to test a rumor. But when the waitress whispered, "We don't serve people like that here," she had no idea the man she was insulting signed her paycheck. What happened next would expose every hidden prejudice inside that coffee shop and change its future forever. He stepped into the cafe quietly, dressed in an old gray hoodie, faded jeans, and shoes that had seen better days. The bell above the glass door jingled softly, but no one at the counter bothered to look up. The place was bright and modern, filled with the smell of roasted coffee beans and chatter from well-dressed customers tapping away on laptops. Yet, as the man approached the counter, the atmosphere shifted, like the room had suddenly lost a degree of warmth. The barista's smile faltered. The cashier exchanged glances with the waitress, a blonde woman whose lips curled into a faint smirk. It was subtle, but Marcus noticed everything. He placed a few crumpled bills on the counter and ordered a simple black coffee. "That'll be $9.50, the waitress said curtly, her tone dripping with the kind of politeness that wasn't polite at all. Marcus blinked. $9.50 for a regular cup. The sign behind her clearly listed it for $3. $9.50? He repeated, pretending not to notice the lie. She shrugged with feigned indifference. "Yeah, prices went up for premium service." The smirk on her face widened when she said it. Behind her, another barista laughed under his breath. Marcus could hear them whisper. "Probably can't afford it," one of them muttered. "He's in the wrong neighborhood." The words stung, not because they were new, but because this was happening in a place he had built with his own hands. His company had opened this cafe to represent opportunity, fairness, and respect. Yet the very people he trusted had turned it into something ugly. Rachel, the blonde waitress, prepared his drink in a flimsy paper cup, the kind used for free samples. She didn't even bother to wipe the counter before sliding it toward him. The coffee sloshed over the rim, dripping down the side. "Here you go," she said flatly, already turning away. Marcus looked at the cup, then back at her. "Do you always serve customers like this?" he asked softly. She turned around with a sarcastic smile. "Only the special ones." The man she mocked didn't flinch. He picked up the cup carefully and gave a small nod. "Thank you." He took a sip. It was lukewarm, bitter, and careless, just like the service. Around him, a few customers noticed the exchange but quickly looked away. No one wanted to get involved. Marcus could feel every eye that avoided his. Every silence in that room spoke louder than the whispers. What Rachel didn't know was that Marcus had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Rumors had reached his office, customers of color being ignored, overcharged, or subtly humiliated. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but when complaints started piling up, he decided to see the truth for himself. He came here not as the founder of Williams Coffee Roasters, but as just another man off the street, stripped of status and wealth. Hidden inside his watch was a small recording device, linked to the cafe's security cameras he himself had ordered installed for safety and transparency. As Rachel and her co-workers laughed, the system quietly captured everything: the looks, the sneers, the tone. Marcus wasn't angry. He was disappointed. He had hired people he thought shared his vision, a place where everyone could walk in and feel equal. Instead, he found prejudice served with a side of coffee. He sat down in the corner with his drink, watching the scene unfold. A woman in a business suit walked in moments later, and Rachel's entire demeanor changed. "Good morning, welcome to Brew House," she sang, suddenly cheerful and professional. She handed the woman a proper ceramic mug, offered a pastry sample, and asked about her day. The contrast was glaring. Marcus watched quietly, the taste of irony stronger than the coffee in his hand. When he finished his drink, he stood up slowly, leaving the cup neatly on the table. No confrontation, no drama. He had seen enough. As he walked toward the door, Rachel called after him, "Hey, make sure you don't take the cup. We reuse those." Her co-worker snickered. Marcus paused for a moment, glanced back, and smiled faintly. "Don't worry," he said. "I won't be taking anything that isn't mine." Outside, the afternoon sun hit his face as he took out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts and tapped a name: James, his lawyer and oldest friend. The phone rang once before a deep voice answered. "Marcus, you sound tense. What happened?" Marcus looked back at the cafe, its polished windows reflecting the world's judgment. "It's worse than we thought," he said quietly. "They're not just rude, they're rotten." James sighed on the other end. "You want me to handle it?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. I want to see how deep this goes. But record this day, James. It's the day everything changes." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his jaw tightening with resolve. Behind the calm exterior, his mind was racing, planning, calculating, remembering the values that built his empire: respect, fairness, dignity. As he walked down the street, he passed a billboard advertising his own company, a smiling barista serving coffee to a diverse group of customers under the slogan, "Everyone's welcome here." The words now felt like a mockery. He stopped for a moment and looked up at it, then whispered to himself, "Everyone, huh? Let's make sure of that." Marcus knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to storm in with anger or fire people on the spot. That would be too easy. He was going to expose the truth, systematically, publicly, and without mercy. This wasn't just about a coffee shop anymore. It was about every person who had ever walked into one and been told, silently or directly, that they didn't belong. He adjusted his hoodie, straightened his posture, and walked away with quiet determination. The world saw a poor man leaving a cafe, but the truth was, the owner had just left his own establishment in disguise, and the people inside had no idea that their laughter had just signed their fate. The next morning, Marcus returned to the cafe parking lot and sat in his car, watching the morning rush begin. Through the glass windows, he could already see Rachel behind the counter, her perfect smile reserved only for the well-dressed customers. It was almost mechanical, her voice pitched sweetly for certain faces, cold and dismissive for others. Marcus didn't step inside this time. He had asked James to come instead, to see it all without being warned. James arrived minutes later in his navy suit, looking like any other busy lawyer grabbing his morning caffeine fix. Marcus watched from a distance as his friend entered the cafe. At first, everything seemed normal. Rachel greeted him with that sugary tone she saved for people she thought mattered. But moments later, a Latino family walked in. A young couple with 2 children, their clothes simple but clean, their smiles hopeful. Marcus saw Rachel's expression change instantly. Her fake warmth vanished, replaced by irritation. She rolled her eyes at her coworker and sighed loudly. James ordered his drink and stepped aside, pretending to scroll on his phone while keeping his ears open. "We're out of kid-sized cups," Rachel told the family, even though James could clearly see a stack of them behind her. "You'll have to buy 2 regular ones instead." The mother hesitated, whispering that they could share 1 cup between the kids, but Rachel shrugged. "Health policy," she lied again. Her coworker smirked. When the father tried to pay with cash, Rachel wrinkled her nose. "Card only," she snapped, even though the man before him had just paid in cash without issue. The family exchanged confused looks, embarrassed, before quietly leaving the counter and finding a seat near the door. James could see the little girl clutching a dollar bill in her small hand, her eyes darting between her parents and the counter. The whole scene played out like a script of cruelty rehearsed too many times. James clenched his jaw and left the cafe, dialing Marcus the second he stepped outside. "You were right," he said, his voice low and tight. "It's not just one employee, it's a culture. She humiliated a family right in front of me." Marcus didn't say anything for a long moment. He stared through the windshield, his reflection caught in the glass. When he finally spoke, his voice carried both calm and heartbreak. "I built this place to honor my mother, James, and now it's everything she fought against." That single word, mother, hung heavy in the air. Marcus's thoughts drifted back to the tiny apartment where he grew up. He could still see her, Donna Williams wearing her worn-out cleaning uniform, her hands cracked from scrubbing other people's floors. Every morning, she'd kiss his forehead before dawn and whisper, "Respect doesn't cost a penny, baby, but it'll earn you everything." She worked for people who looked through her like she didn't exist, who made her enter through the back door while their guests walked through the front. But she never let bitterness live inside her. She taught Marcus that dignity wasn't something anyone could give or take. It had to be carried within. Years later, that same boy sold coffee out of a second-hand cart outside his college campus. Rain, cold, exhaustion, none of it stopped him. He'd smile at every customer, remembering his mother's words. Make them feel seen, she used to say. And somehow they did. Students came not just for coffee, but for conversation, for kindness. From that cart grew a single café, then 2, then 50. His company became known for its motto, "Everyone's welcome here." But as success grew, Marcus stepped back from the daily grind, trusting others to uphold his principles. He focused on expansion, on corporate meetings and brand partnerships. Somewhere along the way, his message diluted. Now, standing outside his own cafe, he realized how far his dream had drifted. His company was no longer serving coffee with compassion. It was serving judgment with a smile. That realization lit something fierce inside him. Marcus wasn't the kind of man to let anger burn without purpose. He wanted justice, not revenge, and justice required truth. He turned to James. "I don't just want to fire them," he said quietly. "I want to know why they think they can act this way. Who taught them this? Who else is involved?" James nodded slowly, already understanding where this was going. "You want to dig deeper?" Marcus contacted a private investigator later that afternoon, a quiet, efficient man named Colin who had worked with him before. He gave him a simple instruction. Find everything you can about Rachel, not just her work record, her online behavior, her contacts, the people she talks to when she thinks no one's watching. Colin agreed without hesitation. As Marcus hung up, he stared out the window of his office. From up there, the city looked clean and peaceful, like everything was in order. But he knew better. Somewhere beneath the polished surface of success, rot had taken hold, and he was determined to cut it out completely, even if he had to tear apart the foundation he'd built. That night, he couldn't sleep. The memory of his mother returned again, how she'd once been denied service at a restaurant because of her uniform. She hadn't made a scene. She simply walked Marcus outside, sat with him on the curb, and handed him half of her lunch. "Don't hate them," she'd said. "Just be better than them." He'd promised her he would. And now, looking back, Marcus realized this moment wasn't just about his employees or his company. It was about keeping that promise. The investigation had begun. Soon, the truth would come crawling out of the shadows. Marcus knew that whatever they found, it would change everything. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. This lesson wasn't going to end with punishment. It was going to end with revelation. It took only 3 days for Colin to call back, and when he did, his voice was grave. "Marcus, you're going to want to sit down for this." Marcus leaned back in his office chair, his hands tightening on the armrests. Colin began reading from his report. Rachel wasn't just rude in person, she was proud of it online. Her social media accounts were filled with subtle jokes and memes mocking undesirable customers, thinly veiled in sarcasm but heavy with meaning. Screenshots of customer complaints followed by laughing emojis. Captions like, "Some people just don't belong in classy places." Marcus listened in silence, each word a nail driven deeper into his chest. But what made his stomach twist was what came next. "She's not alone," Colin continued. "She's part of a private WhatsApp group called the Elite Service Squad. I infiltrated it using a decoy account." He paused. "It's worse than you think." The group was made up of employees from several locations of Marcus's own company, baristas, shift managers, even assistant supervisors. They shared stories, pictures, and coded language meant to humiliate or avoid serving people they deemed unfit for their cafe. They had actual tactics, fake system errors to delay customers, overcharging specific groups, pretending the card reader was broken. Even small gestures, like marking cups with dots or initials that signaled to coworkers how to handle certain customers. Marcus felt sick. "And Jennifer?" he asked, referring to the cafe's supervisor. Colin's sigh on the other end said it all. "She's one of the group admins. In fact, she's the one who started it." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. He just stared out his office window, the city below looking smaller and more hollow than ever. These people weren't random bad apples. They were the rot that had quietly spread through the heart of his creation. Anger simmered beneath his calm surface. But this time, Marcus wouldn't rush. He wasn't going to fire them quietly and let them play the victim later. No, this needed to be seen, heard, and remembered. He took a deep breath and said, "Thank you, Colin. You've done enough. I'll handle the rest." That evening, Marcus opened a drawer in his study and pulled out a small black case. Inside were 2 miniature cameras and a lapel microphone, tools he had used years ago when investigating fraud during his company's expansion. He hadn't thought he'd need them again. But this wasn't just about protecting his business now. It was about protecting the soul of what his company stood for. The next morning, he dressed carefully, simple jacket, plain cap, and an old messenger bag slung across his shoulder. He looked once again like a man the cafe staff wouldn't take seriously. He positioned one camera in the button of his jacket and the other in his cap's brim, the mic clipped discreetly to his collar. Then he walked back through those glass doors as if it were any ordinary morning. Rachel spotted him first. Her reaction was immediate, a roll of the eyes and a muttered, "Not him again." Jennifer, standing behind the counter, didn't bother hiding her disdain. "Let's make this quick," she said to Rachel, her tone sharp and smug. Marcus approached the counter and greeted them politely, pretending not to notice. He asked for the same coffee as before, handing over a few bills. Rachel didn't even touch the money with her hands. She used a napkin to pick it up. "We only take clean bills," she said coldly. And the price went up again. $12. Marcus tilted his head. 12? That's quite an increase in just a few days. Jennifer smirked from the side. Premium prices for premium people. A few customers overheard and looked uncomfortable but said nothing. One woman, standing behind Marcus, frowned and whispered to her friend, "That's not right." But Rachel and Jennifer didn't care. They laughed quietly between themselves as they prepared his order in the smallest cup they could find. Marcus remained calm, every second recorded by his hidden devices. He knew that the cameras in the corners of the cafe, his cameras, were catching the scene from multiple angles too. Rachel handed him the cup without a sleeve, the hot liquid nearly burning his fingers. "Careful," she said mockingly. "Wouldn't want you to spill that on your nice outfit." The sarcasm stung the air. He took a slow sip and looked straight at them. "You ever wonder who you're really serving?" he asked softly. Rachel blinked, taken aback by the question. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus smiled faintly, setting the cup down. "Sometimes people aren't who they seem." With that, he turned and walked toward the door. Behind him, Jennifer scoffed, "Whatever. Some people just love to act mysterious." Outside, Marcus took a deep breath. He pulled out his phone, checked the feed from the cameras, and watched the footage playback in crisp clarity. The sneers, the insults, the overcharging, every cruel detail captured. The evidence was irrefutable. He dialed James immediately. When his friend answered, Marcus's voice was steady, controlled, but filled with fire. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., emergency staff meeting at the cafe. Bring the legal team and the PR director." James hesitated, sensing the storm brewing. "You found something?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "I found everything." As he hung up, a strange calm settled over him. He looked through the cafe window one last time, seeing Rachel and Jennifer laughing, oblivious to the fate waiting for them. They thought they'd humiliated another customer today. What they didn't realize was that they had just written the final chapter of their careers. On camera, in their own words. Marcus turned away, walking into the fading evening light. The sting was complete. Tomorrow there would be no disguises, no pretense, no more shadows. Only truth, shown to everyone, with no place left to hide. The next morning, the cafe buzzed with uneasy energy. The staff had been ordered to arrive early for an emergency meeting, though none of them knew what it was about. Rumors flew between whispered conversations and uneasy glances. Some thought it was a surprise audit. Others believed new management rules were coming. Rachel, however, seemed completely at ease. She leaned against the counter with her coffee, smirking as she whispered to Jennifer, "Watch. They'll probably announce my promotion today. About time they noticed who's running this place." Jennifer chuckled, crossing her arms confidently. "You've earned it, girl. Nobody handles the floor like you do." At exactly 9, the glass door swung open and silence spread like a chill. Marcus stepped inside, no hoodie this time, no disguise. He wore a dark Armani suit, the kind that seemed to command attention without effort. His posture was calm, composed, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet authority that silenced even the whispers. Rachel blinked, her smirk faltering. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone shifting from arrogance to confusion. Marcus simply replied, "Yes, you can start by gathering everyone." Within minutes, the cafe's small dining area was filled with staff. Some stood nervously. Others tried to appear relaxed. Marcus stood near the counter, facing them. James was beside him, holding a laptop connected to a small projector. A woman in a gray suit stood nearby, a composed presence with sharp eyes. Rachel leaned toward Jennifer and whispered, "Who are they?" Jennifer shrugged but frowned as she noticed the lawyer's professional badge. Marcus began to speak, his voice steady and controlled. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus Williams." A few heads lifted in surprise. Rachel froze, blinking rapidly as if trying to process the name. "As some of you might know," he continued, "I am the founder and majority owner of Downtown Brew." A ripple of shock spread through the room. One of the baristas dropped a pen. Rachel's eyes widened. Jennifer's jaw tightened. Marcus let the silence stretch for a few seconds before continuing. "I visited this very cafe last week. Twice. Once as a customer you chose to humiliate, and once again as the man you didn't realize was watching you." The projector came to life behind him. The room dimmed slightly as video clips began to play. Rachel, rolling her eyes, mocking a customer, overcharging Marcus, lying to the Latino family and laughing about it with Jennifer. The staff watched in horror as their own actions appeared larger than life on the wall. Every cruel word, every sneer, every fake excuse was there in clear, undeniable sound. Rachel's face turned pale. Jennifer's hands began to tremble. A barista gasped, whispering, "Oh my God." Marcus turned toward Rachel and Jennifer. "This is what happens when people forget the values that built this company. Respect, equality, humanity." He gestured to the woman in the gray suit beside him. "This is Dr. Evelyn Williams, a labor rights attorney and corporate ethics consultant. She's here to explain what your actions legally mean." Dr. Williams stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "The behavior shown here violates company policy, civil rights law, and multiple labor regulations. Discrimination of any kind, especially against customers, can result in criminal liability, fines, and termination." Rachel's voice broke the silence, trembling between fear and denial. You can't be serious. It was just jokes, misunderstandings. You can't prove intent." Marcus's eyes didn't waver. "Your messages, your videos, and your own laughter proved it for me." Jennifer stepped forward angrily. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We were just maintaining standards." Marcus's tone hardened. "Standards don't come from cruelty. They come from character, and both of you just showed me how little you have." He nodded to James, who handed him 2 envelopes. "Rachel, Jennifer, effective immediately. You are terminated from employment at Downtown Brew. Security will escort you off the premises. You will also be reported to the proper legal channels for discriminatory misconduct." The room was silent except for the rustle of paper as the 2 women took the envelopes with shaking hands. Rachel's voice cracked. "Please, I didn't mean—" Marcus interrupted softly. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect to get caught." As security guided them out, the remaining staff stood motionless, stunned by what they had witnessed. Marcus faced them once more. "I didn't build this company to become another business that looks the other way. My mother used to clean offices for people who treated her like she didn't exist. I promised myself I'd never allow anyone to feel that way in a place with my name on it." His voice softened, and for the first time the room saw not just a CEO, but a man driven by something deeper than profit. He turned back to the projector, changing the slide. Starting today, we're launching the Williams Protocol. It's a new training and conduct system, zero tolerance for prejudice, immediate accountability, and ongoing education about inclusion. But more than that, I'm establishing a fund to support minority entrepreneurs, people who've been told they don't belong in business. The staff began to nod, the tension melting into a sense of respect. Some even clapped quietly. 6 months later, Downtown Brew was transformed. Word of Marcus's public reckoning spread across the city, turning the cafe from a scandal into a model of integrity. Customers of all backgrounds began visiting in record numbers. Profits tripled. But what mattered more to Marcus was the shift in spirit. Laughter that came from kindness, not mockery. He walked through the cafe one morning and saw new faces behind the counter, baristas serving everyone with genuine warmth. Rachel never found another job in the service industry. Jennifer faced legal actions and disappeared from the headlines altogether. Marcus didn't celebrate their downfall. He simply moved forward. At the entrance of the cafe, he unveiled a bronze plaque. The words engraved on it shimmered under the morning light. To my mother, who taught me that dignity is not negotiable. As he looked at the plaque, Marcus smiled softly. The pain, the betrayal, the disappointment, all of it had become fuel for something greater. In that moment, he understood what true victory meant. It wasn't in firing people or proving them wrong. It was in building something stronger, something unbreakable. Walking back into his cafe, he whispered under his breath, "True revenge isn't shouting or fighting back. It's succeeding beyond what your enemies believe you deserve." The aroma of coffee filled the air again, this time richer than ever, brewed with fairness, respect, and redemption. For more stories like this, subscribe to Simply Stories.